Thanks everybody so much for being here and joining us. This is actually, let me get my presentation going here. This is actually part three of a series that we've been doing here on the Business Booster webinars over the last, gosh, I guess four months or so. Called How to Speak CEO, and the first one we talked about all kind ROI and payback periods and opportunity cost. I'm going to go in a little bit different direction today on this one. This one is, are you eating your own cooking? And this is, I'm taking off for those of you who were in the session that we did. There were four of us. We did a session at the last PartnerCon, me, Samantha Bennett, Christy Hamilton, and Jeanette Gleason. And it was about 20 minutes apiece. Well, I'm going to expand on my talk there at PartnerCon, and hopefully you will get some really good takeaways, actionable takeaways that you can do something with as a result. So, in terms of what do I mean by eating your own cooking? Well, here's the big idea. Imagine that you went to a doctor who was overweight, drank, smoked, and never went to the gym. Now, how would you feel when he told you that you needed to exercise more and lose weight, right? You're going to think, well, that's the pot calling the kettle black. And more importantly, how likely are you to take his advice? If you're like me, you'd be fairly unlikely. So, my question is this: when your clients and prospects interact with you, is it clear to them that you eat your own cooking? Or are you an example of the cobbler's children not having any shoes? Are you using Infusionsoft to its fullest potential in your own business? And if you are not, what subconscious message does that send to your prospect or client, just like the overweight, smoking, drinking doctor? That might not be a subconscious message, right? But whether it is conscious or subconscious, we all pick up on these things. We're looking for authenticity and congruence in the message. And anytime we don't find that, it sends up a red flag, right? So the challenge is, how do we find time to work on our own businesses? How do we find time to implement the ideas that we sell to our clients in our own businesses? And like all of us, the API guys, it is always, always, always a struggle to do that. And I believe that the reason it is such a struggle is something that we call the tyranny of the urgent. So some of you may have seen this chart before. What it does is it has two axes. You have a impact or importance axis, which is the vertical axis, and then you have urgent on the horizontal axis. And we break things up into the four quadrants like everybody has always seen. So you have tasks that and well, let me just before I talk about that, let me just define what I mean by important or impact. I think urgent is pretty obvious, right? We all know what urgent means. It means it's pressing time wise. Someone expects us to do it right now. There's an appointment, there's a set date. But impact or importance is a little bit more subtle. What I mean by importance is that it has a long-term strategic impact on the company, as opposed to something which may need to get done, but it's not strategic. It's not long term. It's more of a task, right? And so that's what I mean by impact. How long term is that impact? How important is this to the future of the company? And then urgent. And so we put them in four quadrants. And so the two quadrants, the upper right and the bottom left, these are pretty obvious, right? So if something is both urgent and important, we can pretty clearly say we're going to do those things. Those are probably going to be our number one quadrant. And similarly, the bottom left, I think, is also equally obvious. It's neither urgent nor important, so we're probably never going to do those tasks. I'm not even going to bother to list them because we're just not, we're, first of all, we're never going to get to them. If you're like me, your list is so long, you're never going to get to them, and you certainly shouldn't be doing them. The big question marks are top left and bottom right. So we have tasks which are important, high impact, but not urgent. And then we have tasks which are high urgency, but not important. And how do we stack rank those? How do we decide what to do next? So, some examples of urgent and important would be, good customer service, client projects, training, documentation, events and conferences. Although you might debate that. This is just because, by the way, these things are different for every company, particularly what's important and what's strategic. To me, urgent are but not important are most meetings. Most meetings are useless, right? And could be handled faster. And if I didn't attend them, chances are, the impact on the company would not be that big. Phone calls, email, right? Those are urgent. They have times associated with them. They're intrusive. You have to take them. Someone's expecting an answer, but not necessarily important. And then on the important but not urgent, you have things like strategic planning and creating infrastructure and doing marketing and prospecting, hiring the right personnel and building culture and new products, right? Those are clearly strategic, but there's no immediate deadline forcing you to get them done. And so the problem is that, at least for us, we know that we have to do first quadrant, urgent and important, and we do. And I think the tendency for most people is that we have a tendency then to gravitate next to urgent, not important, right? Because we don't want to let people down. We don't want to miss a deadline, etc. We don't want to say no. Okay, that's another big one. Instead of, what I would suggest is the more important quadrant, and that is important, not urgent. It is strategic, but it has no deadline. If you don't do it, probably nobody's going to call you on it. And I think that this difficulty with those two quadrants is the reason that most of us do not get the opportunity to work on our business. We mainly spend our time in our business in those two far right quadrants, right? I'm sure you can relate to that. So what I would like to do, this idea of balancing the important with the urgent has been a major focus for us at the API Guys for over a year now, particularly for me. And so I thought I would take the opportunity to share with you some of the things that I have tried out and have found to work. But before I do that, I have to throw out this massive, huge caveat, and that is this. I am so far from perfect on everything that comes next in this presentation. I just want to put that out right now. I fall off the wagon all the time. I am distracted by shiny objects just like everyone else. I am constantly getting in my own way. But these are super basic, tried and true ideas and methods that I have proven to myself that when I do them, I know they work. And so I'm going to share them with you as not the right way, but just some ideas that we've been working with that I know work and might help you as well. Okay, so that's kind of the spirit in which everything that comes next is offered. Okay, so when I think about how to break the tyranny of the urgent, I break it into three things: systems, mindset, and habit. Now, systems is interesting. I was just listening. I had to run into town. For those of you who don't know, I live on a farm out in the middle of nowhere. If someone says you don't go for you don't go for groceries, you go for supplies. Right? It's not a 10-minute trip to the grocery store for us. It's like an hour each way. But I had to go into town this morning, and I was listening to a podcast in the car, which I usually do. And I heard a guy give an acronym for system that I had never heard before. And I think I've heard most acronyms. He said system stands for saves you time, energy, and money. So I don't know if you've heard that one before. If not, you can steal it like I just did. I thought that one was really good. System saves you time, energy, and money. So let's talk about our systems first. I'm only going to, like, I could talk about all of this for days. Obviously, I've got an hour. So I'm going to try to narrow it down to some of the core concepts and pick the ones I think are most interesting and most useful. But for each of these, I'm going to give you first a focus question. So here's my focus question for systems. If you hired you, what advice would you give you? This gets to the essence of, are you eating your own cooking? If you hired you, what advice would you give you? If you step back and you objectively answer this question, then and execute on the advice that you've given yourself, then chances are you're going to find out that you were a pretty good consultant. But on the other hand, I suspect that most of us will find that it's the same advice we give our other clients, and we are ourselves not doing it. Now, if you are like us, I think probably most of us come up with, quote, systems, ways to explain to our clients how to, what to do. We come up with acronyms, we come up with steps, we come up with systems. We have a system, right? And remember what I said up front, like if you aren't implementing your own systems, then what does that say to your customer? So here's our system, one of them we talk about all the time. That system is first you eliminate, then you automate, then delegate, then consolidate. Okay, so let's talk about that. Now, the interesting thing about this is that not only do we meaning me and the API guys, need to apply this to our business, but I find that this also applies to my personal life as well. And the reason for that is because as for small businesses like ours, the lines between personal and business get very, very blurry. And so the rest of my talk is also going to sort of address that blurry line. Okay, so I always believe that when we're trying to wring ROI out of a business or out of a process, the first thing you do is you want to eliminate. You want to find what can you get rid of? What is the 80% that is only bringing you 20% of the result? And literally just get rid of it. Stop doing it. That's really hard for a lot of people. But the fact of the matter is, most customers, firing customers that are that 20%, sorry, that 80% that bring you 20% of your profit, activities that are in that 20%, all those things need to be eliminated. Okay. The next thing, once I've eliminated everything I can eliminate, then my next step is to automate. All right. I think we all are really familiar with the automation step, so I'm probably not going to spend a lot of time on that. But other than to say it's really easy to automate everyone else and not ourselves. Third thing then is now I've automated everything. Okay, so you can tell I'm kind of working my way up in terms of the need for human intervention, or particularly mine. So then the next thing is to delegate. And here, now this is this is an interesting concept. So the first idea is, and I said this in, I think, both part 1 and part 2 of How to Speak CEO. Okay, so the idea here of delegation is, and this applies both business and personal, again, because those lines are blurry. So first of all, you have to know your value. You have to know what is 1 hour of your time worth to your business. That's a calculation. That is how much profit do you bring to the company in 1 hour of your time, plus any opportunity cost there is of if you were doing something that if we were able to free your time up from what you were doing so that you could do something more valuable, how much extra profit would that bring? That's the opportunity cost component of your worth. Those two numbers together are what an hour of your time is worth. And this, as I said in a video that I posted the other day, has absolutely nothing to do with the number that you get paid. Okay? We may choose to pay ourselves one thing, the market may pay us one thing, but our worth to the company is generally a much higher number. You got to know, in order to figure out delegate, you have to know what that number is. Okay? So, you know, it can be for, I said in a video the other day that when I calculated this as the CEO of my investment firm, back then, this number was at the time $1,500 an hour for me, and I know that later it got bigger. But right now, let's just imagine for round numbers, and because my firm is much smaller now, that it's a couple $100s an hour, okay, which is really realistic for a profitable business and the person running it. Okay, so if my time is worth, let's just say $100 an hour, because that's so safe. If my time is worth $100 an hour to the firm, right? Anything that someone else can do 80% as well as me at less than $100 an hour, I have to delegate it. I have to. The only caveat to that, as I said previously, is if it's just something that you love to do, or it's the thing that well, I can't say it's the thing you do better than anybody else, because probably then no one would be able to do it 80% as well as you. But if it's just like, look, I know I should delegate this, but I just love doing it, so I'm going to keep it. Okay, that's your prerogative. But otherwise, you need to delegate it. Okay? And that means, so for the small business owner, so I'm going to share with you some thinking on this, right? So for me, and this is hard, by the way, delegating is hard for many reasons. I suck at it, and it's hard because it plays tricks on your mind, right? You think, oh, I can't afford to delegate. But if your time is worth $100 an hour, then and someone can do it for less, then you can. But anyway, so for me, I delegate things that people probably wouldn't think of. So besides having an assistant, for example, I have as much help around the house and the farm as I can possibly get. I have a housekeeper who cooks, right? Who does our grocery shopping for us. She cooks breakfast and lunch for my husband and I, which is really important when we get to the next section of consolidate, and I'll tell you about that in a second and why that's so important. I have folks who do the mowing. Could I do the mowing? Yes. Have I done the mowing around the farm? Absolutely, I have, right? I have horses. I play polo. I have grooms who take care of my horses. Now, is that me being spoiled? Nope. That is me saying that every single hour that they free up for me generates a multiple of what I pay them in my business. And therefore, right? I am being more productive. Now, if while they were sitting there, cooking and mowing and what have you, I was just sitting on my duff doing nothing, that would be different, okay? But I'm not. Every single hour that they free up for me goes into my business, and therefore generates some multiple of what I pay them to do it, and therefore is a fabulous investment for me. And if I could find more time and I was better at delegating, I probably would find more time, right? More things that I could delegate, not just around the house, but elsewhere. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So if someone else can do it 80% as well as you at less cost, you should not be doing it, period. There is never an exception, even though I make them all the time. Okay? Now, the next step is consolidate. Now, what I mean by that is, so now we have tasks. And so consolidate may mean we've got those tasks spread among different vendors, different employees, okay, or different times. So no matter what it is, right, the next step in wringing ROI out is to consolidate that among one employee, among one vendor, or doing something which I feel really strongly about, which is called time blocking. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about this too in the next section. But here's what I do. So And again, not perfect, fall off the wagon all the time. But by time blocking and consolidate, what I mean is this. So for me, I have a morning ritual, right? From 5 to 9 every morning, 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. I work on the most important thing I could possibly be doing that day for our business so that no matter what else happens in the day, if my whole rest of my day goes to hell in a handbasket, I've gotten the most important thing done. I've put in 4 solid, uninterrupted hours of work on our business, right? And from there, I can kind of breathe easy. Then I have breakfast with my husband, right? Which I do not cook, which is nice because I literally stand up from my computer on the porch and have breakfast 2 seconds later and then turn around and sit back down, right? So that's worth paying for me. That is not a good use of my time. Then I block from 9 to noon every day for the next most important thing in my life, which is to ride or play polo. From 9 to noon every day, that's, that is time blocked. Then I have lunch with my husband. Again, this is really important time for us personally. That's how we do it. We don't have kids, so we're different from a lot of people, but nonetheless, right? Walk down to the house, have lunch with my husband. And then for me, I have phone calls and meetings from 1 to 7 p.m. every day. That's, again, another block of time. And then what I do within that is at times I will block big chunks of time out of my schedule. Like, for example, coming up the next 3 weeks, my polo tournaments start. So I've been like working like crazy, right? I've gotten the class out of the way. I've gotten all these things so that I can block out time for my polo tournaments. I do the same when I'm teaching classes. But that, so time blocking, right? That's for me, right? In order to be effective as a small business CEO, that is my best example of consolidate. Although there are others, by the way, but just trying to give you an idea of what I mean by consolidate. Okay? Hopefully that's giving you guys a little bit of ideas. So, all right, I'm going to keep moving in the interest of time. So, with regard to systems, the question I would ask yourself is this: are you taking your own best advice? And if you aren't, again, what does that subconsciously say to your prospects or clients? All right, so let's move on to mindset. I've already touched on a lot of this, but for me, the idea of working on the business to reach our goals. The goal for our business, just so you know, for the API guys, is to help 5,000 people by 2016. That's our goal. Help just doesn't mean 5,000 clients, 5,000 anything. It means help 5,000 people, presumably Infusionsoft users, but not necessarily. Okay, so all right. So in order to achieve that goal, then that also requires a mindset, because that's a big goal. Actually, for me, that's a really big goal. So here's the focus question for mindset. I did not come up with this question. It comes from a book which I highly recommend you read called The One Thing by Gary Keller. The focus question is, what is the one thing you could be doing this year, quarter, month, week, day, or minute that would make everything else easier or unnecessary? For those of you who don't know this book, Gary Keller is the founder and CEO of Keller Williams Realty, name I think we all recognize. I actually was in my teaching my mastery class, the art of campaign building mastery class, and I was talking about something like this, and someone says, "Oh, the one thing," and I was like, And they're like, "The book, The One Thing, you're saying the one thing." And I was like, "Nope, no, I don't know the one thing." They go, "Oh my gosh, you have to read the one thing." And now I can't stop talking about the one thing, because everything that it takes a lot of my ideas and takes them to a whole nother level. So I highly recommend it. And this is the focus question. Now, this is one of the most powerful questions I have ever heard in terms of moving my business and my personal goals forward? What is the one thing you could be doing this year, quarter, month, week, day, minute that would make everything else easier or unnecessary? What's so cool about this question is it's fractal. It scales up and down in every time frame. Okay? So the focus question, right? The one thing is about something, it's really about the domino effect. And when I say domino effect, most people just think of that as like a row of dominoes that one falls and the next one falls and the next one, and that it's just about one thing triggering another. But this idea and the power of this idea is actually much, much bigger, because as it turns out, a falling domino can topple an object 50% larger than itself. So, if each successive domino is 50% bigger, a domino chain that starts with a 2-inch domino can topple a domino as tall as the Leaning Tower of Pisa in only 18 dominoes, and the Eiffel Tower in 23. And it's called a geometric progression. Believe it or not, there are papers, MIT papers, that get published on this idea by mathematicians and physicists, and it's known as a domino fall, right? And it's this geometric progression of finding the 2-inch domino that I can push in my business to create the domino fall. And if I can find that 2-inch domino, then I don't need to slog away 8 hours a day on my business. I need a couple of hours whenever. For me, it's in the morning. But I need a couple of hours to work on that first domino, right? That will cause all the rest of the dominoes to fall. And then I can spend the rest of the time working on client calls and whatever, right? That's how I eat my own cooking, is by being really smart. And I'm talking about the proverbial I, right? Is by being really smart about how we work on our business so that we get the maximum impact from the little bit of time that we have, looking for the domino fall. So how do we do that? So the idea of the one thing, so I am summarizing a great book in 4 bullet points. But so the first idea is to brainstorm that focus question. What is the one thing I could do right now, or this month, or this week, or today, this morning, that would make everything else easier or unnecessary? And I mean brainstorm, okay? So to begin with, you've got to put a bunch of ideas down on paper in order to find the lead domino, because you typically won't have it right out of the gate. But the idea is that you are taking your, and I don't want to say tasks, I am talking about your big, urgent, impactful, strategic activities, and you are ordering them in such a way as to create a domino fall, right? So that when you push one, right, the next one becomes easier and easier or unnecessary, okay? But you got to get the right one up front. Find the lead domino. And along with that, you have to do 2 other things, and these are really hard. One is you have to learn to say no to everything else and say, nope, right? I am going to pursue the lead domino. I am going to pursue the one thing with an obsessive focus, and I am not going to spend time on anything else that doesn't contribute to the one thing. Which means not only are you saying no to others, but you also have to be absolutely relentless in what you tell yourself no to. And frankly, for me, that's the harder part. I'm pretty good at saying no to commitments and things on other people. I'm pretty good at guarding my time against that with time blocking, but I can be my own worst enemy, because while I may bar the gates from the inside, I'm still in there, and that's really hard for me, and I have to work at it all the time. And then the other aspect of this idea of most productive way to work on your business is to embrace the chaos. And when I read this, it was so freeing for me, because I think this is the big piece that's so hard for everybody. So if I really get focused on the one thing and the lead domino, and I devote some number of hours a day to it, what I have to do is I have to give up these ideas like living a balanced life and multitasking, and that everything matters equally, that answering an email to somebody within this business day is as important as achieving this big strategic objective that might make the company hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's just not true. They aren't equally important. They will never be equally important. And when you start embracing the idea of working on the lead domino to the exclusion of all the other things, then chaos happens, because people don't get answers that they expect. You're not necessarily going to you're not going to please everybody. And some people aren't going to like that. But the question is, what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to be the most liked? Are you trying, I mean, it's crazy. The way we try to do business is crazy making. This is why we get stuck on the. Sorry, I'm about to get like on a little tirade here, but I'm speaking to myself as much as anyone. The reason we get stuck over that in that urgent but unimportant section is because of the expectations we allow other people to put on us about what we should do and how we should respond. And as a result, we end up never getting to the important but not the urgent. So that's what I mean by chaos. When you start ignoring the urgent, I promise you there will be chaos. But if you're okay with it, and you can get okay with it, amazing things happen. You can push your company in ways in such a short period of time that you can't imagine. Um, so that's the one thing. And the what I ask myself about this all the time is, what can I achieve if I focus on the one thing? And if I'm not, again, what does that subconsciously say to my prospects or clients? What can I achieve? And I don't know if she's on the call, but I have to give a shout out to Karen Carroll, who's one of our fellow ICPs. She's the one that actually turned me on to this book. Um, smart gal in her own right, who knows a little something about building cool things. So that's the one thing. All right. Then the next thing I want to talk about is habits. So first we're drilling down. We started with systems, then mindset. Okay, now how do we put these into practice? So again, millions of ways that this manifests itself. I'm just going to talk about one, and it's the one that's made the biggest difference for me. When I changed this, everything changed. The focus question here is, how would things be different if every day I was able to spend 3 uninterrupted hours on the one thing? This presupposes you know what the one thing is, of course, but then once you know that, what if I could spend 3 uninterrupted hours on the one thing? What could I make happen? So then the question becomes, how do I find those 3 hours? And I'll tell you what I did, and some of you are just going to groan, but what I did was I started getting up at 5 a.m. And I will tell you that I am not a morning person. I am like, I was one of those night owls. In fact, I went the other way. I was one of those people who was because I'm like the developer type. I always have been though. So I always thought I did my best work at night. I would be the person who was up until 3, 4 in the morning, drinking caffeine, working through the night, wake up again, 10, whatever. I mean, I usually had to get up earlier just because as the CEO can't usually sleep until 10. But I did most of my heavy lifting work at night. And then I started noticing through just different reading that I was doing. Actually, I'll tell you how I got onto this. It's not the typical way, but I will tell you. I was doing that, and there was a period when I was building the API guys, up until maybe, I would say, yeah, Thanksgiving of last year, where I was like working on 4 hours of sleep and I kid you not, for probably, a year straight. And one of the things I started getting really worried because my memory was horrible. It still is. I still don't feel like I've recovered properly. But the other thing is I play the second most dangerous sport in the world. It's second in danger only to speedboat racing, right? And what I started reading about sleep deprivation is that it's essentially like, being drunk. And I'm playing the second. I would literally, have 4 hours sleep and then go play polo. That's crazy. So that's really got what sort of started me on this journey of sleep, and then sleep to, oh my gosh, I better get 8 hours of sleep, and then how can I be more productive? And anyway, long story short, I ended up flipping my entire schedule around to this idea of waking up at 5 a.m. after 8 hours of sleep, and the idea that if you look at all high achievers, you will notice that they, for 99% of them, have this one thing in common, that they wake up early and they have a morning routine. 99% of them. So it's like, okay, well, if 99% of high achievers wake up early and have a morning routine, gosh, I've always believed in finding people who are getting the result you want and doing that in the absence of anything better. So that's what I did. And it has made all the difference in the world. Now, my morning routine is very different than most people's. So I've read, there is a book, an excellent book called The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. If you have not read it, I highly recommend it. Most people's routine, they get up at like 5, they exercise, they read, they pray, whatever. That's not my routine. My routine is I get up when I'm not falling off the wagon. I get up. I have make sure I get 30 grams of protein and a protein shake within 30 minutes of getting up, and then I sit down at my computer and I start working. And still in my pajamas. That is my routine. And I pound it out until 9 o'clock at breakfast, my second breakfast. And so I have 4 hours of basically absolutely uninterrupted work. I shut out all distractions. I use software. Um, I use whatever it takes to not look at Facebook, not look at email, not look at anything. I sit down and I work on the one thing. That is it. And at 9 a.m., like I said, no matter what happens, my day totally goes to hell in a handbasket. I'm good, right? I've done the most important thing. And a lot of days it does, right? So that is my routine. That is my way. There are probably other ways to find those 3 hours. But that's been the thing that has just absolutely moved the needle. Believe it or not, the most simple thing that has moved the needle for me more than anything that I have done in a really long time. So the question that I would ask yourself on this one is, why is it that 99% of high performers share this habit? And if I want to be a high achiever, then doesn't it make sense to mimic what most of them do? So I think this is a little bit of a case of, fake it until you make it, right? Um, all right. Let's see. One of my most favorite sayings, again, it goes with this idea that I've always believed, at least in my career, of, find people who are getting the result you want, do what they do, right? In the absence of anything else, it's a great shortcut. And then as you do that, and you make it your own. Bruce Lee said it even better when he said, absorb what is useful, discard what is not, add what is uniquely your own. And that's exactly what I would say about everything that I just said to you today, right? It is offered in that spirit, not that this will ultimately be your way, but absorb what is useful, discard what's not, and then add what's uniquely your own, and see what you can do to build a business that models what it preaches and is congruent and consistent with what it is that we ask and tell our clients to do. So with that, Jen, I'll take any questions.
Love it. And first of all, I just have to say I love your passion. I found myself laughing out loud a few times, so it was a good thing I was on mute. So so thank you for that. Yes, I do have a few questions on here and to the group on the line. If you have any questions for Kim, now's your chance. go ahead and type them into the chat box, and I will be able to get those answered by Kim. But a few questions here. How hard is it really to find the domino? And what if I can't find it, or I don't think I found it?
Interesting. So I think at first it is a little hard, and I think that's okay. If you because look, I mean so there's this idea, aim for the stars, and even if you miss, you hit the moon, which ain't all bad, right? So even if you don't get the domino at first, what if you get three in or something? I mean, that's not all bad. I think it's as much at first, just the practice of it. But honestly, I think I do think you will, if you sit down and you really give it enough thought, that you will find it. Like, for us, our domino right now, my domino right now, my big domino for the company is our training program that we're trying, we've come out with. Like that is the so if my goal, right? Because here's what you do. So you start with the goal. My goal is to help 5,000 people by 2016. So then you say, okay, if that's my goal, then you say, okay, what is the one thing I could do which would make that, possible or easier or everything else unnecessary. So you start at the top and you say, okay, well, probably the way I'm going to reach the most people, right, would be by starting a training program, because we didn't have one. We were custom developers, right? And then you work and you say, okay, well, then if I'm going to start a training program, what is the one thing I could do that would make everything easier or unnecessary? And then so you come up with with what's next, and then you literally you keep applying that focus question all the way down in every time frame until you literally get to well, if my goal is to put on a class in May, what's the one thing I need to be doing today that will allow that will make that easier and or unnecessary? You see what I mean? So you just keep working your way down, and I think you'll find it. I think you'll know what it is. But and one other comment on that, Jen. It sort of, again, it sort of does sort of presuppose that you have a direction in mind. Well, I guess it does. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't. Because it does work in small time frames too. But I find it is most powerful when applied to a big goal, like, shooting for the moon.
Thank you. That makes sense. And actually, that's one of my favorite quotes that you mentioned too, so I like that as well. Great questions you guys are asking in the group, so I have a few more. Do you have a coach to help you grow your business, systems, etc.?
I do not. And you know what? I talk to people all the time who do. And it's interesting. I should. Like, this is one of, I should. I absolutely know I should, and I haven't done it. And the reason is, I always tell people that in other regards, I have coaches everywhere else. I have so many coaches in polo and in writing, and I don't for my business. Isn't that crazy? So I know I need to, and I don't. Tiger Woods has
Thank
a
you.
coach, right? Why don't I? Anyway,
No, it was a great question.
it is
All
a
right.
super great question.
Another one now. You mentioned podcasts at the beginning. Which do you love or recommend to help us build our businesses, stay motivated, positive, etc.?
Oh, wow, great question. So I used to listen to, I don't know, like 30 podcasts. I've really gotten that down to a much smaller list now. So the ones that I absolutely, the three or four that to me are can't miss are Less Doing by Ari Meisel, The Business of Freelancing, which is Brennan Dunn, um, Startups for the Rest of Us, and my favorite right now is the Tim Ferriss show, the guy who wrote the 4 Hour Work Week the 4 Hour Chef and the 4 Hour Body. And because what he does is dissects all of these guys to some extent, or yeah, are about kind of dissecting peak performance. But I love his, love it.
Perfect. All right. If your schedule does not accommodate the 5 a.m. early alone time, what other recommendations can you give us?
Sure. Look, I mean, I I think there is something magic about early morning. I wouldn't have believed it until I tried it. But if it's just not possible, then it's just a matter of time blocking somewhere else. Which I explained, and which I've gotten pretty good at, and I guard those time blocks really, really jealously. So if you can't do it first thing in the morning, then you're just gonna have to block it out somewhere else. That makes sense. That you can be, because the key to it is you have to be able to be consistent with it to really get the benefit. Otherwise, it's if it's not a habit, then it'll be really hard to do. I will tell you, if it's not in the morning, it's going to be harder, because that's the time when nobody's sending you emails, your phone is not ringing, no one's knocking on your door, nobody's asking you for a meeting at 5 a.m. Most everybody else is still asleep, and your brain is fresh and ready to go. But I understand that that is not possible for everybody.
That makes sense. All right. And in terms of delegation, what if you don't have the money or the budget to do that like you want to?
Right. That's the big myth. You do have the money. This is like a optical illusion, or this is a game, a trick that your mind plays on you. I do it too all the time. And what you have to trust is the math, because if you don't have the money in the bank, right, you say, oh well, I can't hire someone to do that, because how am I going to pay them? And what you have to trust is the math, that there is you know you there is an infinite amount of money to be made. um, there's just only so much time and effort that you can put toward making it. And so if you use that limited amount of time and effort more productively, you will make more money. So you almost have to just every time kind of take a leap and say, I understand that the money is not there, but if I in fact use that time in a way that produces, it will be there. And you just have to trust. It's really hard. It's like, any of you, if you guys remember, like the Indiana Jones movie, where he basically couldn't see the bridge across the canyon, but he just had to take that first step, and it was there. It's exactly the same. You have to trust that it works. The math just works. The money will appear if you use the time that is freed up wisely.
That's a good analogy. I love that analogy. The second you said that, I had the instant visual of that, so it's perfect. All right, so let's see. What are other habits that you use to help keep you focused and productive?
Wow, what a great question.
Perhaps some tough
Other
ones.
Yeah, other habits I use. So gosh, like, I think the problem is that there are so many of them. I so one of my new favorites is, I don't drink coffee, and I was a really bad caffeine addict. I still am, but I drank awful, diet sodas and stuff. So I've like switched to high calf tea. I use lists incessantly. Like, I'm an app geek, as everybody probably knows. So I use loads of apps, like Evernote and Dropbox and Swipe and gosh, just all kinds of apps to keep me productive. There's a couple. Actually, there's one on my phone that I use that's really important, and it's like the number one selling app on the App Store, called Sleep Cycle, which measures it does two things, which are really cool. One, it measures how the quality of your sleep every night, which is crazy. But the other thing it does is it measures the cycles of your sleep, and you set your alarm at like 5 a.m., but it wakes you up when you're the most awake, because you like you go from like awake to sleep, awake asleep, the REM cycles at night. And so instead of like your alarm jolting you out of bed at 5 o'clock when you're in a deep sleep, it tries to wake you up when you're just on the edge of awake anyway. That's a nice little touch. I love that app. I'm trying to think. I think the time blocking is really the biggest one, and using time wisely, like listening to podcasts in the car, things like that.
And that actually leads to a good question. If we're talking about apps and other things that can help you out, are there any other automation tools besides Infusionsoft, obviously, that you use and like that help you out?
Yes. Um, the auto for automation, the biggest by far that I use is Zapier. I love Zapier. I did a webinar on it recently. The number of things without spending a lot of money and hiring a developer, the number of mundane things that you can automate away with Zapier is pretty astounding, and I'll just give you some examples, like, and these are, yeah, I mean, we automate big things with Zapier too, but these are mundane things. So for example, we have two Facebook groups that we run. I if I get on Facebook, I could, it's like the, Alice in Wonderland, like I could be lost forever. So one of the things we do with Zapier, we use, for our team to communicate internally, we use a app called Slack. So what we do is anytime someone posts something in one of our groups that we may need to answer, we have Zapier grab that post out of the group and put it in Slack, which is someplace we all are anyway. And so that tells us, oh, someone just asked us a question in one of our Facebook groups. We'll go answer it instead of, for example, having to go check Facebook every so often and then, going down some black hole. Things like that. I have it, email me when a check is received. Just all kinds of little mundane automations that add up every single day. We do those with Zapier. Other than Infusionsoft, that's my next favorite tool.
Awesome. And then actually, that's a good thing you said that, because if you guys missed Kim's presentation on Zapier, she's volunteered to repeat it again for us on June 10th. So if you guys missed that, you have another opportunity to hear that live with her. So thank you in advance for the next
Sure.
go around with us, since I ask you all the time. So, all right. And it looks like that's it on questions, unless anybody has any else, and we're getting close to the top of the hour anyways.
All right. Let me just finish with this, Jen.
Do it.
All right. So here's my final question that I want you to ask yourself. When you dream about your business and what it could be, what do you see? Because the only thing typically standing in the way of that dream is you. So go make it happen. And if I can help, reach out.
Love it. Love it. And then definitely Kim has her contact information up there. Did I cut you off, Kim, or was
Nope, that is it.
That's it. So thank you, Kim, as always, for your expertise, your passion, and everything you do for us and for partners. So thank you so much. We'll definitely see you again in June. But if anybody has anything, Kim's contact information is up there. And if there's anything I can do as well, please let us know. But other than that, I did get a comment of next time we want a picture of you with your horses. So throwing that out there, Kim.
You should not ask that, because it throws me. Deal.
So that's the deal for next go around. But other than that, thank you everyone for your participation, your great questions. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, everyone else. And we will see you again later on. So have a great week, everyone.
Thank you, Jen. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.